I never thought my wedding day would turn into a circus. But if you put my sister Shannon in the same room with free wine and an audience, you're basically begging for chaos. People always said we were different. I joined the army, kept my life straight, saved my money, and served in Afghanistan. Shannon bounced from job to job, never held anything down for more than a year, and always seemed to be on the edge of some new business venture that nobody asked about. Still, I didn't think she'd use my wedding to settle a score that only she cared about. The day started out perfect. Beulah Valley isn't exactly Vegas, but the mountains in Colorado give you this postcard backdrop that makes you forget how dry the air is and how badly your shoes pinch after 3 hours. Tyler, my husband, looked nervous as hell, but in a good way. I wore my mom's old necklace, the one she left me when she passed, and it actually felt like she was there. Family and friends filled the hall, about 200 people in total. Music, laughter, all of it. For a brief moment, I believed nothing could go wrong. Then Shannon showed up. Of course, she was invited. She's my sister. But she walked in late, already sipping champagne like she owned the place, and kept giving me this look. Not the "I'm happy for you" kind of look. More like the "I'm plotting something" kind of look. Anyone who's had a sibling who thinks they're smarter than everyone else knows that look. The ceremony went fine. I managed not to trip down the aisle, which I considered a personal victory. Tyler and I said our vows, kissed, everyone clapped, and I thought, okay, maybe Shannon will behave. Maybe she'll just sit in the corner and complain to whoever will listen about how unfair her life is. But Shannon never just sits in the corner. She needs a spotlight like a plant needs water. The reception was rolling along. Dinner, toasts, all the cheesy stuff you'd expect. Then Shannon stood up. At first, I figured she was just going to embarrass me with some story about us as kids, like the time I cut her hair with safety scissors because she told me I wasn't army material. Instead, she walked up to the microphone like she was auditioning for a reality show. The room quieted. 200 sets of eyes were on her. She cleared her throat dramatically, and then she dropped the bomb. "Since we're celebrating family today," she said, "I think it's time Riley does the right thing. Hand over the keys to Coyote Ridge." I swear you could have heard a fork drop. My heart stopped. Coyote Ridge is the ranch that's been in our family for generations. It's not just land, it's work, sweat. Our entire history rolled into 800 acres of dirt, cattle, and fences that never stay fixed. And here she was in front of everybody demanding I hand it over like it was a set of car keys. I froze for a second. Tyler looked at me like he'd just watched a car accident. My stepdad, Calvin, nearly choked on his water. Guests were whispering, trying to figure out if this was part of the entertainment. And me? I just felt the heat rise in my face. I grabbed the microphone from her and said as calmly as I could manage, "Shannon, this isn't the time or the place." Wrong move. She snatched the mic back and raised her voice. "No, this is exactly the time and place. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. Riley's been hoarding the ranch like it belongs only to her, but it's supposed to be family property. Hand over the keys, Riley. Do the right thing." You ever felt 200 people staring at you, waiting for your reaction while your own sister tries to strip you of your dignity? It's like standing under a spotlight you never asked for. My stomach twisted, but I forced my voice steady. No. That one word was enough to set her off. Shannon's face turned red. She waved a small velvet box above her head like she was hosting an auction. "Funny thing is, I already have these." She opened the box to show a shiny set of keys, duplicates of the ones to the house, barn, and shed. "All we need now is for Riley to stop pretending she's in charge and hand over the originals." Gasps rippled through the room. Calvin looked like he'd seen a ghost. Tyler whispered, "Where the hell did she get those?" I knew exactly how. Shannon must have sweet-talked someone into letting her borrow my keys, then ran to the hardware store. Typical Shannon move, shortcut her way to power instead of earning it. I took the mic back, trying not to shake. "You went behind my back and copied my keys? In front of our entire family? You think this is appropriate?" She smirked, eyes glittering with self-satisfaction. "What's inappropriate is you clinging to something you can't manage. Everyone knows you're gone half the time with the army. You think you can keep this place running? You can't. Hand it over, Riley. Stop pretending." That line hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't just attacking me, she was undermining my service, my entire life. The army didn't make me less capable. It made me disciplined enough to keep Coyote Ridge alive. And here she was, twisting it into a weakness. The crowd buzzed. Some people looked uncomfortable, others curious, like they were watching a live episode of Family Court. I could feel my face burn, but I stood my ground. The ranch isn't going anywhere, and it sure as hell isn't yours to demand. Shannon leaned in close, her voice dripping with venom. It's ours, Riley, and everyone here will see just how selfish you are when you keep it locked up for yourself. The tension snapped. People shifted in their seats, whispering louder now. Tyler tried to step in, but I waved him off. If Shannon wanted a showdown, she was going to get one, but on my terms. I set the mic down and walked off the stage, leaving her standing there with her stolen keys and her smug grin. I could feel eyes drilling into my back as I pushed through the doors and out into the hallway. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from rage. Shannon thought she could humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. She thought public pressure would break me down. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I pushed through the heavy doors into the side hallway, my heels echoing against the tile floor, my pulse pounding in my ears. The cool air outside the reception hall hit my face, and I leaned against the wall, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. Guests were still murmuring behind the closed doors, probably dissecting what Shannon had just pulled, but I didn't care about their gossip. What stung was, knowing my own sister had chosen my wedding day to gut me in public. Tyler slipped out a minute later, his tie half undone, eyes wide with that same helpless look he'd worn when Shannon started her performance. Riley, are you okay? His hand hovered like he wanted to reach for me, but wasn't sure if I'd let him. I laughed, though it came out harsh. Do I look okay? She hijacked my wedding and tried to turn it into a courtroom drama. He rubbed the back of his neck. Half the room didn't even know what she was talking about. People were confused. Some thought it was a joke. I crossed my arms, still shaking. It wasn't a joke. She planned it. She wanted to humiliate me, and she did it in front of everyone who matters. The door creaked again, and Calvin, my stepdad, stepped out. 68, gray hair under his cowboy hat, still broad-shouldered from decades working the ranch. He carried himself like a man who'd seen worse than family drama, but tonight his face was pale. Riley, he said quietly, you need to come with me. My stomach nodded. Why? What else did she do? Not here, he muttered, eyes flicking toward the doors. He motioned down the hall. Let's get some air. Tyler stayed behind while Calvin and I stepped outside into the crisp Colorado evening. The mountains stood like dark silhouettes against a fading orange sky. Calvin shoved his hands in his jacket pockets. She's been sniffing around the ranch paperwork for months. I didn't want to bring it up before your wedding, but she's been asking questions I can't ignore. The words landed heavy. What kind of questions? Ownership. Lease agreements. Who technically holds the deed? He hesitated, and I saw the guilt written all over his face. Riley, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. Coyote Ridge isn't exactly in the family's hands the way you think. I stared at him, cold dread creeping up my spine. What are you talking about? That ranch has been ours since Grandpa. Calvin's voice cracked. Back in '06, after your mama got sick, I had no choice but to work with Western Heritage Land Trust. We sold the development rights to keep the place afloat. They own the easement. We manage it, but we don't fully own it anymore. I blinked, trying to make sense of his words. So what you're saying is, we can't sell it. We can't develop it. We just keep it running? He nodded. Exactly. It's protected land. But Shannon doesn't care about that. She's been digging for a way around it. That stunt she pulled tonight? She wanted to corner you, make you look weak, so she can claim she's the one fit to manage it. The anger in me simmered hotter. She'd been plotting this while I was overseas, risking my life in a desert halfway across the world. I clenched my fists. She thinks she can just walk in and take everything, like the years I put in don't matter. Calvin's eyes were tired. She's desperate, Riley. Last I heard, she's drowning in debt from some failed event business. She wants to turn Coyote Ridge into her meal ticket. I paced across the gravel, wedding dress trailing through dust I didn't even care about anymore. The pieces were clicking together, her smugness, the keys she copied, the timing of it all. This wasn't just jealousy. This was desperation dressed as entitlement. The sound of the hall doors opening again broke my thoughts. Two of my cousins walked out, whispering to each other, their eyes darting toward me before quickly looking away. News was spreading already, twisted and inflated. Shannon's words would echo in every living room in Beulah Valley by morning. Tyler finally joined us, phone in his hand. "People inside are divided," he said, exasperated. "Some think Shannon had a point about the ranch being family property. Others think she's crazy. But Riley, this could get ugly. If she starts dragging your Army service into it, you know how people talk." That cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I'd heard the whispers before that deployments change you, that soldiers come back broken. I had spent years proving I wasn't broken. I'd worked twice as hard as anyone, disciplined myself to keep every detail tight, because I knew one slip-up would be used as ammo. And now my own sister was ready to weaponize that against me. I forced myself to steady my breathing. She can run her mouth all she wants. I'm not about to hand her the ranch just because she screams louder. Calvin gave me a long look. "You might need more than stubbornness. She's got copies of the keys. That's not just embarrassing, that's a breach. If she tries to enter the property, we could have a real mess on our hands." Tyler frowned. "So what do we do? Call the cops?" Calvin shook his head. "Not yet. That'll just blow it up faster. First, you need to know exactly what Shannon's been plotting. She didn't make duplicates for no reason." The weight of the night pressed down on me. My wedding was supposed to be about love, vows, the start of a new life. Instead, I was standing in the cold, dress dragging through gravel, realizing that the real battle was just beginning. Not on foreign soil this time, but right here in my own backyard, against my own blood. I straightened up, the soldier in me overriding the bride. If she wants a fight, she picked the wrong opponent. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. I wasn't going to let her humiliate me again. Not at my wedding. Not ever. Inside, the music started up again, muffled through the walls, like nothing had happened. But out here, under the wide Colorado sky, the line between me and Shannon had been drawn in concrete. I didn't sleep that night. Tyler passed out on the hotel bed, still in his dress shirt, but I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, replaying Shannon's stunt over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smug face waving those copied keys in front of 200 people. By sunrise, I was done being humiliated. If she wanted to fight dirty, I'd drag every truth into the light. The next morning, I drove straight to Calvin's place. He was already out on the porch with coffee, like he hadn't slept much either. He didn't look surprised to see me pull up. "Figured you'd be here," he said, handing me a mug without asking. I sat down, staring across the fields of Coyote Ridge. The land stretched wide and quiet, fences cutting into the hills, cattle dots moving slow. To anyone else, it looked peaceful. To me, it looked like a battlefield waiting to happen. "Calvin," I said, "I need to see the paperwork. All of it. No more half-truths." He hesitated, rubbing the rim of his cup. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," I shot back. "You said last night the land trust owns the easement. Show me the documents. I need to know exactly what Shannon thinks she can get away with." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right. But once you see it, there's no going back to pretending." We went inside. His office smelled like dust and old wood, the shelves stacked with binders and folders that hadn't been touched in years. He pulled out a locked drawer and set a heavy folder on the desk. When he opened it, the truth stared me in the face. Deed transfer. Easement contract. Western Heritage Land Trust stamped across every page. My mom's signature, shaky from the treatments she'd been going through back in 2006. Calvin's name right beside hers. They'd signed away the development rights to keep the ranch alive when medical bills were eating them alive. I flipped through page after page, each one a reminder that the ranch wasn't ours in the way I'd always believed. We didn't own it outright. We managed it, leased it, but the real control sat with the trust. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked, and I hated it. Calvin leaned back, eyes tired. "Because you were 17. You had your eyes on West Point. You didn't need the weight of this on your shoulders. I figured, what good would it do to tell you that the ranch wasn't really ours anymore?" The anger that had been simmering since the wedding boiled over. "It would have done me a lot of good, Calvin. Instead, I've been out here busting my ass thinking I was protecting something that belonged to us." He looked down at his hands. "It still does. Just not the way you thought. We keep it running. We keep the family name tied to it. But selling it? Developing it? Not an option. That's what Shannon doesn't understand. I shoved the papers back into the folder. Or maybe she does, and she just doesn't care. The thought twisted in my gut. Shannon wasn't stupid. Reckless, yes. Selfish, always. But stupid? No. If she was trying this hard, it meant she thought she had an angle. I left Calvin's place with the folder in my arms. Back home, I spread everything across the kitchen table, the way I'd lay out a mission plan overseas. Paperwork, contracts, my own notes scribbled in the margins. The Army had drilled into me one thing above all. Know your terrain. This was mine. Tyler wandered in mid-morning, rubbing his eyes. You've been at this all night? Look at this, I said, jabbing a finger at the easement contract. The trust holds conservation rights. That means Shannon can't sell it to her developer buddies even if she wanted to. But she's acting like she can. Either she doesn't know, or she's planning to fake her way through it. He leaned over the table, scanning the pages like he had a clue what any of it meant. So, what's her endgame? I dropped into the chair, frustration boiling. Money. She's drowning in debt. If she convinces people I'm unfit, she can muscle her way into managing the ranch. Then she uses it as leverage, tells some investor she can get around the trust. She cashes out, walks away, and leaves us holding the bag when it all burns down. Tyler frowned. Can she really do that? Not legally. But if she forges the right signatures, makes enough noise, and plays the victim, she can drag us through court for years, and that's enough to bleed us dry. The words felt heavy, but they were true. Shannon didn't need to win legally. She just needed to create chaos, and chaos was her specialty. That afternoon, I dug through more files, tax records, utility bills, old letters. That's when I found it. A receipt from a locksmith in town, dated 2 months ago, paid in cash. The service? Duplicate farm access keys. My stomach dropped. Proof. Shannon hadn't just guessed her way into those shiny duplicates she waved at the wedding. She'd gone behind everyone's back and hired a professional to copy them. I held the receipt up for Tyler. She's been planning this longer than we thought. She wanted control, and now she's building her case. One step at a time. He whistled low. That's insane. She's your sister. She stopped being just my sister when she declared war on me, I muttered, shoving the receipt into a separate folder labeled evidence. That evening, I drove back out to the ranch. The barn smelled like hay and oil, the same way it had since I was a kid, but now it felt like someone had violated it. I checked every lock, every door, knowing Shannon had keys to all of it. The idea of her walking through, snooping, staking claims, it made my skin crawl. As the sun dipped low, I leaned against the barn door, my head pounding. Secrets that had been buried for decades were now weapons in her hands. And the worst part? Everyone in town would believe whatever version of the story she screamed the loudest. I pulled my phone out, staring at the contact list. There were people I could call: lawyers, old Army buddies, maybe even the land trust directly. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let Shannon dictate the terms anymore. The battle for Coyote Ridge had already started, and I intended to win. The next morning, I drove into town, the kind of small Colorado place where everyone knew everyone, and gossip spread faster than wildfire. I wasn't planning on running into Shannon, but there she was outside the bank, cigarette in one hand, phone in the other, pacing like a trapped animal. She didn't notice me at first, too busy snapping at whoever was on the other end of the call. I told you, I'll have the money. Just give me 2 weeks. No, you don't get to threaten me. I've got leverage. Her voice was sharp, panicked. Then she turned, spotted me, and the panic vanished behind that familiar smirk. Well, if it isn't Captain America herself, she sneered, flicking the cigarette onto the sidewalk. What? Come to lecture me on family values? I crossed my arms. Funny, considering you were just begging for time from some loan shark. That the kind of leverage you brag about? Keys to a ranch you don't even own? Her jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Had duty fist. Oh, I think I do. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You're broke, you're desperate, and you thought humiliating me at my own wedding would scare me into handing over the ranch. But here's the problem. Shannon, you didn't do your homework. The land trust owns the easement. You can't sell it off to your developer pals. For a second, the mask slipped. She blinked, just once, before regaining her footing. You think I didn't know that? Please, People don't care about legal technicalities. They care about what they see, and what they saw was you refusing to take care of family. You looked unstable, Riley, and if I keep pushing that narrative, you'll look unfit to manage anything. It wasn't just a threat, it was a strategy. She was playing the long game, setting me up piece by piece. I leaned in, my voice steady. Push me, Shannon, and you're going to find out what discipline and strategy really look like. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Discipline? You think your army tricks scare me? This isn't Afghanistan. This is Beulah Valley. People here already think you're cold, distant, and bossy. I'm just giving them a story that fits. I walked away before my temper got the best of me. But her words echoed in my head the entire drive home. She wasn't just reckless, she was calculated. And that made her dangerous. That evening, Tyler came into the kitchen, where I had documents spread across the table again. You're at it like a war room, he said half-joking. That's exactly what it is, I answered. Shannon's not just after money, she's after reputation. She knows if she can paint me as unstable, she can drag me through the mud until I either cave or the court decides for me. He frowned. So what's the move? Evidence, I said simply. I showed him the locksmith receipt, then my notes from the land trust contract. I build a case, step by step, just like a mission briefing. Night. Tyler sat down, scanning the papers. I hate to say this, but she's got a head start. I overheard her talking to Aunt Louise earlier. She's spinning the story already, saying you've got combat stress, that you're paranoid about people taking the ranch. I froze. She's using my service against me? Tyler nodded grimly. She knows exactly which buttons to push. That hit harder than I expected. I'd served 12 years, deployed twice, and never once let anyone call me unstable. Now my own sister was painting me as broken for her own gain. I forced myself to focus. Then I'll show her what broken really looks like when her whole house of cards collapses. 2 days later, I got a call from Martin Lopez, a lawyer I'd served with years ago who'd since opened his own practice in Pueblo. Riley, he said. I heard through the grapevine that Shannon's making noise about Coyote Ridge. You need to get ahead of this. She's telling people she's already co-manager of the property. My grip tightened on the phone. She's not. She forged keys, Martin. She's spreading lies. Then we need to lock it down, he said. Restraining order, cease and desist, the works. But you'll need ironclad evidence. I promised him I was working on it, but when I hung up, my phone buzzed again, a text. From an unknown number. Stay out of this, Riley. You don't know who you're dealing with. I stared at it, my pulse steady but cold. That wasn't Shannon's style, too clean, too deliberate. Which meant she'd dragged someone else into this. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Out at the ranch, the floodlights flicked on automatically when I drove up, but one was shattered, glass scattered across the dirt. A warning, maybe. Or just Shannon's goons playing games. Either way, it told me I was running out of time. I went through the barn, checking locks again. Every shadow felt like it had eyes. My training kicked in. Listen, observe, breathe slow. This wasn't paranoia, this was caution. In the office, I opened the safe and tucked away the locksmith receipt, the land trust files, and the growing pile of notes. Then I sat at the desk, pulling out a blank sheet of paper. At the top, I wrote, OPORD, Operation Ridge Defense. Old habits die hard. I started structuring it the way I would any mission. Situation, mission, execution, sustainment, command, and signal. Shannon wanted to turn this into a family drama? Fine. I'd turn it into a tactical plan. As I wrote, something in me settled. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was planning, calculating, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt like I had the upper hand. The wind rattled the barn door, but I didn't flinch. If Shannon thought she could break me down with rumors and threats, she'd forgotten one thing. I knew how to fight a war on 2 fronts. And family or not, she'd chosen the wrong enemy. I woke up the next day with the OPORD still on my desk, half finished and covered in coffee rings. My handwriting looked like it had been done under red light in a combat tent, which in a way wasn't far from the truth. The house was quiet, but my head was loud, packed with strategy. Shannon wasn't going to win this on intimidation, not while I had structure, evidence, and the discipline the Army had drilled into me for 12 years. The first step was to secure myself. I booked a full medical and psychological evaluation at the VA clinic in Colorado Springs. The doctor there, an old pro with a blunt way of talking, ran me through memory tests, physical endurance checks, even reaction times. "You're sharper than most 30-year-olds, he said, flipping through the results. I don't know who's suggesting otherwise, but they're wasting their time. I asked for everything in writing, signed and notarized. He raised a brow but didn't argue. That folder went straight into the evidence file back home. Second step, document Shannon. I started recording every interaction with her. Colorado's a one-party consent state, which meant as long as I was in the conversation, I could record it. The first call came sooner than I expected. She rang me up at 9 a.m, sugar in her voice. "Riley, listen. I didn't mean for things to blow up like they did. You embarrassed me, I embarrassed you. Let's just move on." "Moving on means you stop lying about owning the ranch," I said, flat. Her voice sharpened immediately. "You think you're better than me because you wear a uniform. People don't care about your medals, they care about stability. And when the time comes, the court will believe me over you." I let her talk, every word sliding into the recording app. The arrogance in her tone wasn't new, but the confidence was. She'd clearly been promised something by someone. When she hung up, I labeled the file Shannon, Threats, 1, MP, 3, and backed it up twice. Evidence, not emotion. That was my new mantra. Step 3 was support. I called Martin Lopez, my lawyer friend, and told him everything I'd gathered so far. He whistled when I mentioned the locksmith receipt. "That's golden. Chain of custody, forgery potential, it's all there. Riley, you're building a hell of a case. But be ready. If she feels cornered, she'll lash out harder." "I'm counting on it," I said. "People make mistakes when they think they're untouchable." After that, I set up what I called my command post. The living room transformed into something between a ranch office and a tactical ops center. Maps of the property pinned to the wall, sticky notes marking points of vulnerability, gates, water access, storage. I laid out a timeline of Shannon's moves like an enemy action log. Tyler walked in, carrying a bag of groceries, and stopped dead. "Jesus, Riley, this looks like you're planning an invasion." I didn't look up from the map. That's exactly what this is. She's invaded my life, my wedding, and my name. Now I'm counterattacking. He dropped the bag on the counter, shaking his head. "You know you sound intense, right?" "I sound prepared," I corrected him. "That's the difference between me and Shannon. She plays loud, I play smart." That evening, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time it wasn't a text. It was a voicemail, garbled but clear enough. "Back off, Captain, or the next thing you lose won't be your pride." "Oh?" I played it for Tyler. His face went pale. "She's pulling in people you don't even know. This is bigger than family drama." "Which makes it my kind of fight," I muttered, saving the recording. Another piece of evidence. By the next morning, I decided it was time to go on offense. I called the Western Heritage Land Trust office and asked for an appointment. When I arrived in Pueblo, the office was modern and sterile, the kind of place that smelled like new carpet and legal contracts. A woman named Diane met me, flipping through a thick binder as I explained my sister's stunts. "Miss Grant," she said, adjusting her glasses, "our easement is airtight. Any attempt to sell or develop this land would be in violation. If your sister is trying to misrepresent ownership, we can issue a cease and desist immediately." "That's exactly what I want," I told her. She slid a form across the desk. "Fill this out, attach your evidence, and we'll draft the letter today. The trust has zero tolerance for people meddling with conservation property." Walking out of that office, cease and desist request in my bag, I felt steadier. Shannon thought she could bulldoze me with drama, but she was about to learn how cold paper and law could feel when used correctly. That night, I gathered Tyler and laid out the progress. I've got medical proof I'm stable. I've got recordings of her threats. I've got the locksmith receipt. And now I'll have the trust breathing down her neck. He nodded slowly. "It's solid, Riley. But she's not going to roll over. She'll double down." I almost smiled. Good. The louder she screams, the more reckless she gets. And reckless is easy to catch. The following day, I tested that theory. I called her directly. Speakerphone on, recorder running. "Shannon, the trust is aware of your behavior," I said. They'll be contacting you soon. There was a pause, then a sharp laugh. You think I'm scared of some conservation nerds? Please. Money talks, Riley. And I've got people willing to pay real cash for that land. They don't care about birds or trees. They care about development. You can't stop progress. Her words tumbled out like gasoline, and I let them burn. Thanks for making that clear, I said, hanging up. When I ended the call, Tyler looked at me wide-eyed. You baited her? Yep, I said, dragging the file labeled evidence closer, and she walked right into it. That night, I added another layer to the OPORD. Execution phase. It wasn't enough to defend. I needed to expose her. Every plan she had, every lie she spread, every threat she made, I'd drag it all into daylight. The barn lights flickered as the wind picked up outside, but I didn't budge. I'd been through worse storms in worse places. This was just another mission, another theater. And if Shannon thought family ties would keep me from going full force, she was about to find out how wrong she was. The morning after I baited Shannon on the phone, a courier knocked on my door with an envelope stamped by the Western Heritage Land Trust. Inside was the official cease and desist. The letter was crisp, 3 pages long, and left no room for interpretation. Shannon had no legal authority to represent, sell, or alter the ranch in any capacity. Any further action on her part would be considered fraud and subject to prosecution. I slipped the letter into my evidence folder like it was another bullet in the chamber. Shannon thought she was tough, but I knew the sound of live rounds when I heard them, and this one was aimed right at her. That afternoon, Martin Lopez drove down from Pueblo to go over everything with me. He spread the paperwork across my dining table like we were prepping for trial. Riley, he said, tapping his finger on the cease and desist, this is good, but it won't be enough on its own. Your sister's been making a lot of noise in town. She's framing this like you're unstable, maybe dangerous. If she files for an emergency guardianship hearing, she could drag you into court before you're ready. I stared at him. Guardianship? Like I can't handle my own life? Exactly, he said. It's an ugly tactic, but I've seen it before. If she convinces a judge you're not fit, she could push for temporary control of your assets, including the ranch. The idea made my stomach turn. Shannon waving fake documents was one thing, but her walking into a courtroom with a story about me being mentally unfit? That was a whole different battlefield. Martin leaned forward. We need to preempt her. File for a restraining order, get your medical evaluations on record, and be ready to countersue if she tries anything. End of 40. So that's what we did. I drove to the county courthouse with Martin and filed paperwork for a temporary restraining order. The clerk, a woman who looked like she'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable, raised her eyebrows as she flipped through my evidence. Keys copied without consent, threats, and now public humiliation? She muttered. This one's going to be messy. Messy doesn't scare me, I told her. By the time I left the courthouse, I felt lighter. The legal system might be slow, but I'd put Shannon on the defensive for once. That night, though, the fight got uglier. When I came back from checking fences on the west pasture, I found an envelope taped to my front door. No address, no return name, just my name scrawled in black marker. Inside was a single sheet of paper with cutout magazine letters glued across it. Quit now or regret it. I set the note down carefully, slid on a pair of gloves, and dropped it straight into a plastic sleeve. Evidence, not emotion. That's what I kept telling myself. But my hand shook anyway. This wasn't just Shannon throwing a tantrum. She'd either made the threat herself or let someone else into her scheme. Either way, it meant escalation. Tyler came into the kitchen while I was labeling the sleeve. What the hell is that? Proof, I said flatly. His jaw tightened. Riley, this isn't just family anymore. She's dragging in people who don't care about lines. We need to call the sheriff. I hated the idea. The last thing I wanted was this small town buzzing about cops being called to the Grant family ranch. But I knew he was right. We called the sheriff's office, and 2 deputies came out. One of them a guy I'd gone to school with. He looked over the note, took photos, and bagged it. Look, Riley, he said quietly. We'll file this. But you know how this town works. People are already saying your sister's just passionate about the property. You're gonna need more than scary letters to turn opinion. I've got more, I said. A lot more. He nodded. Then keep stacking it, because if this keeps up, You'll need the whole town to see her for what she is. The next morning, I checked my voicemail and nearly laughed from the sheer arrogance of what I heard. Shannon's voice dripping with venom. Nice try with your restraining order. Won't hold up when the judge hears how unstable you are. Everyone knows you came back from deployments jumpy. Tyler says you don't sleep. I've got people ready to testify. I replayed it twice, then saved it into the evidence folder with the rest. She thought she was smart, but she was handing me rope to hang her case with. Later that week, Martin filed the restraining order in district court. The judge reviewed it and granted a temporary order. Shannon was barred from coming near my property or contacting me directly. When I told Tyler, he finally cracked a grin. So if she tries to pull another stunt at the church or town hall, she's screwed? Exactly, I said. But Shannon didn't back off. Instead, she doubled down. She started making phone calls to family friends, telling them I was violent, that I'd pulled a gun on her once when she visited the ranch. It was a bald-faced lie, and it spread like a grass fire in August. One evening, Aunt Louise showed up at my doorstep, her face drawn tight. "Riley, I need to hear it from you," she said. "Did you threaten Shannon with a gun?" The accusation hit me like a punch. Of course not. That never happened. She studied me, clearly torn. She swore you did, said you waved it around when she asked about the ranch accounts. My chest burned. "Louise, I've carried a weapon in combat zones, not in my kitchen." She's lying. And if you believe her, you're letting her turn you into a pawn. Aunt Louise didn't answer right away, but when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I want to believe you, Riley, but Shannon sounds so sure." That's when it hit me. Shannon wasn't trying to win the legal fight yet. She was poisoning the well, planting doubts so deep that by the time we got to court, the community would already see me as unstable. That night, I added another section to the OPORD. Information warfare. I listed every rumor she'd spread, every lie she'd told, and the counterpoints I had to shut them down. Just like in-country briefings about insurgent propaganda, the key wasn't ignoring it. It was countering it with hard proof, fast. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wall of evidence I'd built. Medical reports, recordings, receipts, cease and desist letters, threatening notes. It looked like a crime board out of a detective show, but it was real. Every piece a weapon in this war. Shannon thought she could drown me with drama. What she didn't realize was that she'd pushed me into my strongest terrain: structure, law, and discipline. And I wasn't about to surrender an inch of ground. The town hall smelled like coffee that had been burning in the pot since dawn and old pine wood from the paneling no one had bothered to replace in decades. I walked in early, folder under my arm, Tyler beside me like backup. The place was already buzzing. Everyone from ranchers in worn boots to retirees in their Sunday best had shown up, all pretending this was a regular community meeting. It wasn't. Everyone knew the Grants were about to go to war in public. I kept my face steady, the way I used to walk into briefing rooms overseas. No expression, no weakness, just control. Shannon was already there, front row, hair curled tighter than usual and lips painted too bright. She looked like she was running for office, shaking hands, smiling too wide. When she spotted me, her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. She leaned over to Aunt Louise and whispered something that made her nod. That stung, but I filed it away. No time for emotion. The county commissioner cleared his throat and started droning on about land use updates and water rights. No one cared. Half the room kept sneaking glances between me and Shannon like they were watching a prize fight. Finally, during the open floor portion, Shannon stood. "Excuse me," she said, voice carrying across the wood-paneled room. "I'd like to raise a matter of family concern that also affects this community." I clenched my jaw. Here it came. She turned dramatically, addressing the crowd instead of the board. "Many of you know my sister Riley. She served in the army, and we're proud of that. But service leaves scars, doesn't it?" She paused, letting the silence stretch. "My sister isn't well. She's been erratic, paranoid, and violent. I've had to step in to protect our family ranch from mismanagement. I love her, but I can't let her instability ruin what's been in our family for generations." Phew! Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. I saw a couple neighbors whispering to each other, their brows raised. Shannon knew how to play her audience. I stood slowly, folder in hand. "May I respond?" The commissioner sighed like he wished he'd called in sick, then gestured for me to go ahead. I faced the crowd, not Shannon. My sister is correct about one thing I did serve. 12 years, 2 deployments. And I came home disciplined, focused, and trained to deal with pressure. What I didn't come home with was instability. I've got medical evaluations from the VA that confirm it. I held up the folder and set it on the front table. Anyone who wants to see them, be my guest. The room quieted. I scanned the faces, then zeroed in on Shannon. What she's leaving out is this. 2 months ago, she paid a locksmith in Pueblo to make illegal copies of the ranch keys. I've got the receipt. She's also been calling around town, spreading lies about me, waving guns and losing my mind. None of that happened. But she needs you to believe it, because she's in debt and desperate. Shannon's face flushed. That's a lie, she snapped. Then why, I said, my voice steady, did I receive a cease and desist letter from the Western Heritage Land Trust this week? Because they caught wind of you trying to misrepresent ownership. You can't sell the ranch, Shannon. The trust owns the conservation easement, and they're not playing games. I pulled the letter from the folder and laid it on the table for the board to see. A murmur rolled through the crowd again, this time heavier, skeptical eyes turning toward her. She tried to recover, flipping her hair like it was all nonsense. Paperwork doesn't change the fact that Riley isn't capable of managing things alone. You all know how hard ranching is. She's gone half the year playing soldier, while the rest of us worry about what happens when something goes wrong. That was her big play, turn the crowd against me with the image of an absent, unreliable soldier. I let her have her moment, then spoke again, calm but sharp. You're right. Ranching is hard. That's why I've built a system. I've got records of maintenance, livestock counts, supply orders, all organized. You know what I don't have? A history of gambling debt, unpaid credit cards, and angry creditors calling day and night. Her head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. Don't you dare. Oh, I'll dare, I cut in. Because you've been hiding it. But people in this town talk, Shannon. They've seen the collection notices, they've heard the calls you take outside the bank. And when those debts come due, you plan to use the ranch as your bargaining chip. 0. The commissioner finally stepped in, banging his gavel. Enough. This isn't a courtroom. Take your family matters out of this meeting. But the damage was done. The crowd wasn't looking at me like I was unstable anymore. They were staring at Shannon, whispers spreading faster than she could fake another smile. After the meeting adjourned, people came up to me quietly. Old ranchers, neighbors, even a few who had clearly been on her side before. They didn't say much, just pats on the shoulder, nods, small gestures that told me the tide was turning. Outside, Shannon stormed toward me, heels clicking on the cracked pavement. You think you've won something? She hissed. All you've done is embarrass yourself. I met her glare without blinking. Funny. That's exactly how I'd describe what you just did. She pointed a finger at me like a dagger. You don't understand the people I'm working with. They don't care about your little cease and desist. And when they're done, you'll wish you just handed it all over. Tyler stepped between us, his voice low but firm. Back off, Shannon. She smirked, but there was something brittle in it now. Enjoy your little victory lap. It won't last. Then she turned on her heel and marched off, phone already in hand. Tyler let out a breath. She's cracking. Not yet, I said, watching her disappear down the street. But she will. Because now she knows she's losing ground. And people who are cornered like that, they make mistakes. Big ones. We got into the truck and drove home, the night air heavy with dust and tension. My phone buzzed on the way back, a voicemail from Martin. I put it on speaker. Riley, it's Martin. Just got word Shannon's lawyer filed notice with the court. She's pushing for an emergency hearing to challenge your fitness to manage the ranch. It's official now. I'll prep everything, but brace yourself. This is going to court. I kept my eyes on the dark highway ahead, the headlights cutting into the night. My grip tightened on the wheel, but my voice stayed even. Good. Let's end this where it counts. 2 days after the community meeting, I was out by the north pasture, checking fences, when a white SUV kicked up dust down the ranch road. It pulled up, and out stepped 2 people in sharp suits who looked about as natural in Beulah Valley as penguins in Arizona. One introduced herself as Claire McIntyre, legal counsel for the Western Heritage Land Trust. The other was Scott Fields, their operations manager. Miss Grant, Claire said, straight to the point. We're here because your sister has been contacting potential buyers, implying she has authority over this property. That's a violation of the easement contract. That. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove. You're telling me something I already know. I've got receipts, recordings, even a locksmith bill. She's been building her scam for months. Scott nodded, flipping through a tablet. We've confirmed she's reached out to 3 different development firms in Denver. She promised them access and preliminary rights. They've been calling us furious since our cease and desist went out. The image of Shannon sitting pretty on her phone, spinning fantasies for investors, made my blood boil. What are you going to do about it? I asked. Claire adjusted her glasses. We're drafting a formal letter threatening litigation if she continues. And we'll be issuing a public notice clarifying that Western Heritage holds conservation rights, meaning no development is possible. That was better than I'd hoped. Good, I said. She thrives on smoke and mirrors. Take away her stage, and she's got nothing. Claire glanced at me over the rim of her glasses. Miss Grant, she's already damaged your reputation. Investors don't like messy family disputes, even if the law is clear. You need to understand we'll protect the easement, but if this drags on, it could hurt your position as manager. The words stung, but they were honest. I gave a tight nod. I'll clean up my side. You handle yours. Ves. By the time they left, dust trailing behind their SUV, I felt like I'd been given reinforcements. Shannon had no idea what kind of fight she'd picked when she went up against a conservation trust with lawyers on speed dial. That evening, I called Martin to update him. He practically cheered when I told him about the investors bailing. That's it, Riley. She's losing her power base. No money coming in, no leverage. Keep stacking the evidence, though. Court isn't about who's right, it's about who can prove it. I knew he was right, so I kept digging. Late that night, I was going through mail stacked on my kitchen counter when I spotted a credit card bill with Shannon's name on it wedged in the wrong pile. It must have been delivered to me by mistake. The charges made my eyes widen. Designer clothes in Denver, hotel stays, even a $4,000 consulting fee to some unknown firm. She wasn't just reckless, she was bleeding money by the gallon. Tyler walked in, rubbing his eyes. You're still up? I shoved the bill across the table. Look at this. She's burning through cash like it grows on the cottonwoods. No wonder she's desperate. He scanned the page, whistling low. She's sinking her own ship. I leaned back, arms crossed, and trying to drag me down with her. The next morning, the storm broke. Shannon showed up at the edge of the ranch, ignoring the restraining order, yelling my name loud enough for the cattle to stir. Tyler tried to hold me back, but I marched out anyway, recorder already running in my pocket. She stood there, in her heels, sinking into the dirt, hair a mess, face red. You think you've won because the trust sent some letters? You think that scares me? I kept my voice level. What scares me is how far you've sunk. You're harassing investors, trespassing on my property, and lying to the whole town. It's over, Shannon. Her eyes burned. No, it's not. You think the trust cares about you? They'll cut you out the second you're not useful. At least I know how to play their game. You're just a soldier pretending to be a rancher. That one hit hard, but I didn't flinch. Better a soldier with discipline than a sister with nothing but debt and lies. She sneered, but her voice cracked. You're going to regret this, Riley. When I'm done, you won't have a name left in this valley. I didn't respond. I just let the recorder capture every word. By the time she stormed off, leaving tire marks in the dirt like claw marks, I felt drained but steady. Another piece of evidence. Another step toward her undoing. That afternoon, Claire from the trust called me. Miss Grant, your sister violated the cease and desist again today. We're filing for an injunction. That means if she keeps this up, she could face contempt charges. I closed my eyes for a moment, relief mixing with exhaustion. Do it. She won't stop until someone forces her to. End quote. The next community ripple came fast. News of the trust's injunction spread like wildfire. Developers pulled out completely, the rumor mill turned, and for the first time, Shannon wasn't the one controlling the narrative. She was losing ground. That weekend, I walked into the local diner with Tyler, and the chatter dropped. Not because of me, but because Shannon was sitting in the corner, sunglasses on indoors, trying to look unfazed. A couple of folks got up from her table and moved to the counter when they saw us. That small act spoke louder than any speech. She caught my eye across the room, and for the first time, she looked Small, angry, but cornered. And in that moment, I realized the trust had done more damage to her than I ever could on my own. Back at the ranch, I added the injunction notice to my evidence board. The wall looked less like chaos now, and more like order, a clear timeline of Shannon's escalation, my countermeasures, and the trust's hammer dropping down. Tyler studied it, arms folded. She's unraveling, Riley, but I don't think she's done yet. Of course not, I said, pinning the last paper. People like Shannon don't back down. They detonate. The cattle lowed in the distance. The wind rattled the windows, and I stood there staring at the wall. Every instinct told me the hardest part wasn't over. Shannon had lost her investors and her narrative, but that only made her more dangerous. And I wasn't about to let my guard down. The kitchen table looked less like a place to eat, and more like a tactical operations center. Papers stacked in neat rows, labeled binders, color-coded tabs. It was the closest thing to a war map I'd had since my last deployment. Tyler leaned against the counter, arms crossed, shaking his head. You've turned this house into Fort Knox, he muttered. Command post, I corrected without looking up. If Shannon wants a courtroom battle, I'm treating it like a combat mission. No sloppy moves. I pinned another sheet to the corkboard, Shannon's voicemail about me being unstable after deployment. Right beneath it, I tacked up my VA medical evaluation, clearing me of any issues. Side by side, the lie and the proof. Evidence wasn't just about collecting, it was about contrast. Tyler walked closer, scanning the wall. She's still pushing signatures, you know. Aunt Louise called me yesterday. Shannon asked her to sign a statement saying Mom intended the ranch to be managed equally between both of you. She refused, but others might not. That made my jaw clench. Forged or coerced statements could poison the water fast. Then we make sure the judge sees every real document before Shannon can waive her fake ones. End quote. I sat down and opened my laptop, drafting a timeline of everything. The locksmith receipt, the copied keys, the fake investor pitches, the cease and desist, the injunction, each incident with date, time, and backup evidence. In the Army, a briefing had to be airtight. You never wanted to stand in front of your CO with half a plan. Court wasn't any different. That evening, Martin called. Riley, the emergency hearing is set for 3 weeks from today. It's a preliminary to determine if Shannon's claims have any validity. This isn't the full trial, but it's your first chance to crush her credibility. Good, I said. By then, I'll have a file thick enough to choke a mule. He chuckled. That's the spirit. One more thing you'll need: character witnesses, people who can testify to your stability, your management, and your service record. I already had names in mind. My old CO, Colonel Briggs, who'd seen me lead a convoy under fire. The local vet, Dr. Palmer, who knew I never missed livestock health checks. Even the sheriff's deputy, who collected Shannon's threatening note, could vouch for the harassment. The next morning, I drove to town and started making calls. The colonel agreed immediately, his voice booming through the line. Grant, if anyone tries to call you unfit, I'll personally set them straight. That one felt like reinforcements arriving on the field. Dr. Palmer was quieter, but just as firm. I've worked with you for years. Records are clean, animals are healthy, accounts are up to date, I'll testify. Back at the ranch, I added their names to my witness list. Tyler peeked over my shoulder. It's like you're building a squad. Exactly, I said. You don't win missions alone. You build a team. Still, the pressure gnawed at me. At night, lying in bed, I kept replaying worst-case scenarios. What if Shannon forged Mom's signature well enough to raise doubt? What if her lies about me being violent stuck, even for a moment? In small towns, reputation could matter more than law. One night, Tyler caught me pacing at 2 a.m. You're wound so tight you're going to snap, he said. I stopped, glaring at the floor. I don't have the luxury of snapping. He sighed. I get it, but remember, you're not fighting insurgents. You're fighting your sister. Don't lose yourself in the process. The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. But he was right about one thing. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was personal. The next day, I focused on tightening security. I had new locks installed, cameras set up around the barns, even motion sensors by the gates. If Shannon or her friends tried sneaking in again, I'd have the footage to prove it. Later that week, Martin drove out to review my prep. He walked into the living room, looked at the evidence board, and whistled low. I've seen law firms less organized than this. I handed him the binder labeled Mission File, Coyote Ridge. Everything's referenced, tagged, and backed up digitally. If Shannon shows up with forgeries, I've got the originals. If she claims instability, I've got medical proof. If she pushes investors, I've got cease and desist orders. He flipped through the pages, nodding. This is solid. Judges like order. They like facts. You're building exactly what we need. Tyler poured coffee for everyone. Question is, will Shannon even show up with a lawyer, or will she just crash and burn on her own? Martin didn't answer right away. She'll show. People like her can't resist the stage. But that's good. The more she talks, the more she exposes herself. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the Rockies. For a moment, the air was quiet, the cattle lowing softly in the distance. It reminded me of patrol nights overseas when the calm was so sharp it made you wonder if the storm was hiding just beyond the horizon. I took a deep breath and looked back at the house glowing warm behind me. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But with every piece of evidence stacked, every ally lined up, and every lie Shannon told documented, I was ready. The hearing wasn't just going to be another fight. It was going to be the battlefield where I proved once and for all that discipline beats chaos. And I wasn't about to let my sister walk in with smoke and mirrors and walk out with my family's ranch. The courthouse in Pueblo was nothing fancy, red brick, old metal detectors at the entrance, the kind of place where divorces, property disputes, and small-time crimes all ended up under the same roof. But to me, it felt like the front line of a mission. I walked in wearing my uniform jacket, not because I wanted to flash medals, but because it reminded me to stay grounded in discipline. Tyler was right behind me, carrying the thick binder we'd built like it was classified intel. Martin met us inside, calm as ever, tie straight, eyes sharp. Today's not about closing the book, he said. It's about framing the story. Judges remember first impressions more than anything else. I nodded, steadying my breathing. Let Shannon talk. I'll counter with facts. The bailiff called us in, and the courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood benches, fluorescent lights, a single state flag by the judge's bench. Shannon was already there with her attorney, a slick guy in an overpriced suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She smirked when she saw me, then turned back to whisper to her lawyer. When the judge walked in, everyone stood. He was a stern man with silver hair and a reputation for having no patience for drama. Good. That worked in my favor. Shannon's lawyer launched first. Your Honor, my client is gravely concerned about her sister's ability to manage the Coyote Ridge property. Miss Riley Grant has a documented history of combat deployments and, we argue, residual trauma affecting her judgment. She has alienated family members, engaged in erratic behavior, and poses a risk to the preservation of this land. And? Shannon nodded along, hands folded primly in her lap like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. When it was my turn, Martin rose. Your Honor, these claims are not only unfounded but malicious. We will present medical documentation from the Department of Veterans Affairs confirming Miss Honor Dedical Grant's full stability. We will also demonstrate a pattern of harassment, forgery, and misrepresentation by the petitioner, Shannon Grant. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. Proceed. Line. Shannon's lawyer called her to the stand first. She walked up with the air of a martyr, hands clasped, voice soft. I love my sister. Truly, I do. But she's changed since her service. She doesn't sleep, she's paranoid about people taking the ranch, and she's lashed out at me. I'm just trying to protect our family's legacy. I kept my face still, but inside the anger simmered. Protect the legacy? She was trying to sell it out from under us. Martin cross-examined her with surgical precision. Miss Grant, did you or did you not hire a locksmith in Pueblo 2 months ago to duplicate keys for Coyote Ridge? Shannon's eyes flickered. I wanted backup keys, in case of emergencies. Interesting, Martin said smoothly. Because the receipt shows you paid in cash, not with the family account, and you had no authorization. Would you like to explain why an emergency requires secrecy? Her lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Next, Martin pulled out the cease and desist letter from the land trust. Your Honor, this document proves that Shannon Grant contacted multiple investors. misrepresenting herself as an authorized seller of the property. The trust itself has filed an injunction against her. This isn't about legacy. This is about money. The judge's eyes narrowed at Shannon. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, lipstick fading as she chewed her lip. When it was my turn to take the stand, I walked up with my folder. Martin handed me the VA evaluation first. "Miss Grant, what is this document?" "It's my medical and psychological evaluation from the VA. It states I'm in full health, mentally and physically." "And why did you request it?" "Because my sister was spreading lies about me being unstable. I wanted proof of the truth." He nodded, then played the recording of Shannon's voicemail. Her voice filled the room. "Everyone knows you came back from deployments jumpy. Tyler says you don't sleep. I've got people ready to testify." The judge's face hardened. "Is that your voice, Miss Shannon Grant?" She sputtered. "Well, yes, but I was upset." The judge cut her off. "Upset is one thing. Fabricating testimony is another." Martin laid out the threatening note, the locksmith receipt, the investor emails, all in order. Piece by piece, the story built itself. Shannon's desperation, her lies, her reckless attempt to grab control. By the time Martin finished, even Tyler looked stunned at how damning the evidence looked when stacked together. Shannon's lawyer tried to regain footing, throwing out accusations about me being militaristic and intimidating, but Martin calmly countered each one with hard proof and witness statements. At one point, Shannon lost her composure completely. She snapped at Martin on cross, raising her voice. "You don't know what it's like to watch her come home different. She thinks she's better than everyone. She's always been like this." The judge banged his gavel. "Control yourself, Miss Grant. This is not a therapy session." Silence fell heavy after that. When the hearing recessed for lunch, I stepped outside with Tyler. He handed me a bottle of water, his hand brushing mine. "You held your ground," he said quietly. "I didn't come here to lose," I replied, drinking deep. My throat was dry, but my resolve was steel. Back inside, Martin wrapped up with closing remarks. "Your Honor, this case is not about instability, it's about control. Shannon Grant has attempted to forge authority where none exists. She has lied to this court, this community, and to investors. Riley Grant has done the opposite. She's provided clear, verifiable evidence. We ask that the court recognize Shannon's actions for what they are, fraudulent." The judge sat back, hands folded. "I've heard enough for today. I'll review the evidence and render a decision shortly. Court is adjourned." The gavel hit wood, echoing sharp in the room. As people shuffled out, Shannon shot me one last look, eyes narrowed, lips curled in something between a sneer and a plea. She wasn't beaten yet, but she knew the ground had shifted under her feet. I walked out into the bright Colorado sun, binder under my arm, chest tight but steady. This wasn't over until the decision was read. But for the first time, it felt like I wasn't just surviving Shannon's attacks, I was dismantling them. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon polish the morning the judge returned to deliver his ruling. I walked in with Martin on one side, Tyler on the other, and my binder tucked tight under my arm. Shannon was already seated at the petitioner's table, her lawyer whispering furiously into her ear while she stared at the judge's bench like she could bend the outcome by sheer will. When the judge entered, the room hushed. He adjusted his glasses, shuffled the stack of files in front of him, and began. "This case has raised significant questions about property management, family responsibility, and credibility. I have reviewed all submitted evidence carefully. I'll agree." My stomach was a coiled spring, but my face stayed still. The judge continued. "On the matter of Shannon Grant's claims regarding her sister's instability, I find no evidence to support them. The medical evaluations from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the testimony of credible witnesses, and the lack of any documented incidents directly contradict her allegations. These claims are unfounded." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Shannon's face flushed deep red, but she kept her eyes glued forward. "Furthermore," the judge said, voice sharpening, "I find that Shannon Grant acted in bad faith. She misrepresented ownership of the Coyote Ridge property to potential investors. She duplicated keys without authorization. She attempted to coerce relatives into signing misleading statements. These actions amount to fraud and harassment." I exhaled, slow and steady. The judge picked up a stamped document. "Therefore, I am ordering Shannon Grant to cease all claims of authority over the ranch. She is to return any and all duplicated keys immediately. She will reimburse the defendant for legal costs incurred due to this matter. Additionally, she is barred from entering or contacting the Western Heritage Land Trust regarding this property without express written permission from the court. Tyler squeezed my hand under the table, a silent anchor. Shannon sprang up, her chair scraping the floor. "You can't do this," she shouted. "She's manipulating all of you. You don't know what she's like." The judge banged his gavel, unimpressed. "Sit down, Miss Grant. This courtroom will not tolerate outbursts." But Shannon wasn't hearing it. Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, hissing for her to stop, but she yanked away. "She thinks she's some kind of hero because she wears a uniform. She's not. She's cold. She's controlling. She stole everything from me." End of treat. Her voice cracked on the last words, echoing across the wood-paneled room. For a moment, she didn't look like the smug manipulator who had humiliated me at my wedding. She looked broken. Cornered, furious, terrified. The bailiff stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Shannon's lawyer finally pulled her back into her seat. She sat there trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The judge's tone was flat, final. "My ruling stands. This matter is concluded." And closed. The gavel fell again, sharp as a rifle crack. When court adjourned, people filed out in a low buzz of whispers. A few nodded at me, some avoided my eyes, but the weight in the room had shifted. Shannon was no longer the loudest voice. She was the defeated one. Outside, the Colorado sun was blinding. The courthouse steps crowded with reporters from local outlets sniffing for drama. Microphones shoved toward me. Questions flying. "Captain Grant, what's your reaction to the ruling? Do you plan to press criminal charges? What happens to the ranch now?" I kept my voice calm, clipped. The court made its decision based on facts. That's all I have to say. Then I walked past them, Tyler and Martin flanking me like bodyguards. Halfway down the steps, I heard Shannon's voice again, brittle but loud enough to carry. "This isn't over, Riley. You'll regret this." I didn't look back. Back at the ranch, the quiet felt heavier than usual. I set the binder on the kitchen table and just stood there, staring at it. Months of lies, threats, and battles boiled down into one thick stack of paper. Evidence had been my weapon, discipline my shield, and both had carried me through. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like surviving a firefight where the enemy had been your own blood. Calvin showed up later that evening. He stepped inside, hat in his hands, eyes full of things he wasn't sure how to say. "I heard the ruling," he said finally. "I should have told you years ago about the trust. Maybe it would have kept some of this from happening." I shook my head. Maybe. But Shannon still would have found a way to make it ugly. This wasn't about paperwork. This was about her refusing to accept limits. Calvin sighed, shoulders slumping. "She's my daughter too, Riley. I can't stand seeing her like this. But you did what you had to do." That night, I sat out on the porch with Tyler. The mountains stretched dark against the stars. The cattle murmured in the distance, and the wind carried the smell of sage. Tyler handed me a glass of whiskey, his eyes searching mine. "You held your ground. You protected this place. I don't think many people could have stood up to their own sister like that." I took a sip, the burn grounding me. It wasn't about standing up to her. It was about protecting what's right. Shannon doesn't get to rewrite reality just because she wants to. He nodded, and for a long while we just sat in silence, listening to the ranch breathe around us. Inside, the evidence board still hung on the wall, every note and receipt a reminder of the war I'd just fought. I thought about tearing it down, but something stopped me. Not yet. It wasn't about obsessing over Shannon anymore, it was about remembering the line I'd had to draw. Family or not, some battles couldn't be ignored. Some lines couldn't be crossed without consequence. And this time, the court had drawn that line in ink. The morning after the ruling, I woke to the kind of quiet that didn't feel heavy anymore. For the first time in months, I wasn't bracing myself for Shannon's voice on the other end of a phone call or her car pulling up uninvited. The storm had passed, but the damage she left behind was still sitting in front of me, scattered across legal papers, unpaid bills, and the reality of what it would take to keep Coyote Ridge alive. I poured coffee and sat with Calvin at the kitchen table. He looked older than I remembered, worn down by years of bad choices and divided loyalties. "The trust wants to meet with you again," he said quietly. "They know the ruling changes things. They're open to talking about a buyback arrangement. And my pen hovered over the edge of a notepad. I'd been waiting for that call. Do they think I can afford it? Calvin shrugged. They don't expect you to write a check tomorrow. They know you've got your VA benefits, your savings, your insurance from mom's policy. They're willing to structure something that keeps the land in the family. I nodded. It wasn't just about land. It was about finally making this place truly ours again, not under Shannon's name, not under someone else's paperwork, but mine to manage and protect. That afternoon, I sat across from the Trust's board in their Denver office. The conference room was glass and steel, a world away from the dirt roads and creaking fences of Coyote Ridge. Margaret, the chairwoman, folded her hands and looked me straight in the eye. Captain Grant, your discipline throughout this process has impressed us. We want the ranch to stay in capable hands. If you're willing, we're ready to sell back the central portion of the property at a favorable rate. They laid out the numbers. It was still a mountain, but it was climbable with a combination of VA, loan eligibility, a small mortgage, and insurance money I'd been holding back since Mom's passing. For the first time, it felt within reach. When I signed the first set of papers weeks later, I felt the weight shift off my shoulders. It wasn't the whole ranch, not yet, but it was enough to anchor it under my name. Enough to keep Shannon's claws out forever. Back at Coyote Ridge, Tyler was already patching the fence line, and Calvin was running cattle through the south pasture. Life had a rhythm again, one that didn't involve emergency binders or courthouse calendars. Shannon, on the other hand, had gone silent. Word spread she'd packed up and left Beulah Valley, her reputation shredded after the ruling and her investor schemes collapsing overnight. People stopped answering her calls, the same way she'd once tried to isolate me. Karma had finally caught her, and this time I didn't have to lift a finger. One evening, I stood at the ridgeline as the sun fell behind the Rockies, painting the valley gold. Tyler walked up beside me, sweat still clinging to his shirt from the day's work. Feels different, doesn't it? He said. Feels like home again, I answered. And it was true. For the first time, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow, not Shannon's, not the Trust's, not even the lingering doubt she'd tried to plant in my head. A week later, the community gathered at the Grange Hall for a harvest dinner. The same people who'd whispered at my wedding now came up to shake my hand, clapping me on the back, saying things like, "Glad you held firm, Riley," and took guts to face her down. I smiled politely, but inside, I knew it wasn't just guts. It was training. It was the discipline the Army had drilled into me, the same skills Shannon mocked when she said I was too rigid or too cold. Those skills had saved this place. After dessert, Margaret from the Trust pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "family revenge stories usually leave nothing but ruins behind. What you did was different. You didn't burn it down, you rebuilt it." Her words stuck with me. She was right. The fight with Shannon hadn't just been about land. It had been about setting boundaries, about proving that loyalty and truth could outlast lies and manipulation. The next months were filled with hard work. Early mornings checking water troughs, late nights balancing the books, and weekends hauling supplies. Tyler laughed when he caught me mapping out tasks in an OPORD format like a field mission, but it worked. The ranch was my command post now, and I ran it the way I knew best, with order, precision, and accountability. Every once in a while, Shannon crept back into my thoughts. The way her voice cracked in the courtroom, the desperation when she realized the game was over. A part of me grieved the sister I'd once had, before envy twisted her into something unrecognizable. But grief didn't change facts. She'd chosen her war, and I'd chosen to finish it. One quiet Sunday, I found myself walking the fence with Calvin. He stopped halfway, leaned on the post, and looked at me. "You know, your mom always said you'd be the one to keep this place alive." I didn't believe her back then. Guess I was wrong. And I swallowed hard, staring out at the land that stretched for miles. I'm not just keeping it alive. I'm making sure no one ever tries to take it again. That night, as I locked the front door and turned off the porch light, I thought about what the whole fight had taught me. Revenge wasn't about striking back. It wasn't about humiliating Shannon the way she tried to humiliate me. Real revenge was living steady, proving her lies wrong by building something she couldn't touch. Coyote Ridge stood. And so did I. Looking back, I realized the fight with Shannon was never just about a ranch. It was about control, trust, and what family really means when the masks come off. She wanted the land, but what she really wanted was power, the kind that comes from making everyone else feel small. For a long time, I thought my only option was to fight her on her terms, blow for blow. But the truth is, I won the moment I stopped letting her define the battlefield. The army taught me discipline, structure, and patience. Shannon tried to twist those qualities into weaknesses, calling me rigid or unfeeling. What she didn't understand is that those same traits are what kept me standing when her lies started stacking up. It wasn't rage that saved Coyote Ridge, it was preparation. It wasn't pride that carried me through the courtroom, it was proof. And it wasn't revenge that gave me peace. It was the choice to rebuild instead of destroy. Family revenge stories usually end in scorched earth brothers not speaking to sisters, mothers and fathers turning on each other, legacies shattered because nobody knew when to stop. My story didn't avoid the pain or the betrayal, but it showed me that revenge doesn't always have to mean matching cruelty with cruelty. Sometimes it's drawing a line, standing your ground, and showing the world that no one gets to rewrite your story for their own gain. Shannon lost more than a court case. She lost the right to call herself part of this family, because family doesn't manipulate, forge, and humiliate. Family protects even when it hurts. I still mourn the sister I thought I had, but I've accepted the reality of who she became. And maybe that acceptance is its own kind of victory. Now, when I walk across the ridge at sunset, I don't feel bitterness in the soil. I feel stability. I feel the weight of responsibility, yes, but also the strength of knowing it's mine to carry, not hers to steal. This land has seen droughts, storms, and decades of hard work. It can survive a jealous sister, and so can I. In the end, the best revenge wasn't breaking Shannon down, it was standing taller myself. The ranch is alive, I'm still here, and no matter what she tried, I didn't bend. That's the kind of victory you don't need to shout about. You just live it every single day.